Welcome back to Ask a Coroner, Inside the Coroner's Office, the podcast where we answer the questions people have always wanted to know and ask about death investigations. I'm Mark Hammond, Boyd County Coroner.
I'm Bailey Rucker, Deputy Coroner.
Each week we take questions from the public and talk about death investigation and really the inside of death investigations and behind the scenes.
Today we're going to talk about something that people are very curious about, what we get asked probably the most about, and that's what actually happens when a coroner arrives on scene. And I want to preface before we get into it that some things might sound a little repeated from the last episode, but we're really going to harp in on it and look at the details today. So the first question we want to talk about is, before the coroner even arrives, somebody gets a phone call. So kind of walk us through that process and who calls you to tell you have to actually go on a death.
So everything that we use is just like any other emergency service. It goes through 911. So whether that be the hospital or whoever is calling that in, they know to call 911, and then 911 will in turn call whoever's on call, whether that be me, another deputy. Those vary because we could have each case that we open up or each call that we get comes through a CAD system. And the CAD system is what everybody uses at 911. Our CADs normally hit in the 500 to 525 range. So that covers everything we do in a year, usually. So the call comes in and a card's cut, and if it is a scene response, then we would respond there, whether that be at a home, whether that be in an emergency room, or whether that be wherever the scene is at, roadway, it doesn't matter. We will respond there, and usually that is either myself or a deputy from the office. Depending on what the case is, even if I'm not on call, I'll go on that call to help. I always say 2 eyes are better than seeing that, and then we have a transporter that'll come out, and they help at the scene also.
Okay, so when you get that call, is there usually information that you're given? Do you know what you're actually walking into? Is there stuff you ask for before you end up in that phone call?
We always do. We want to know what the circumstances are. Is it a car wreck? Did they find their loved one at home, deceased in a bed, or is it a possible homicide? Somebody can usually give us a little bit of information, and that way we know exactly what we're going to be dealing with, and I can get in my head exactly how I'm going to investigate this, what I may need, what I may not need.
So from that information, I feel like this might be kind of a thing because people, when you're looking at it, you might see a drop of blood, but you call that 911 phone call, you're freaked out. You're like, oh, it's a puddle of blood. So when you get that call, is there stuff that is different on the actual scene that was reported to you from dispatch?
And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
The answer is yes, by any means, because dispatch can only give us what they know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when somebody gets on the scene, they may just say, okay, I need the coroner. And in this area, people use different wording to that. With us, it's a 1079. It's a 1079, needs to respond. So in turn, we get the phone call, and I'll ask, hey, what's going on? What were they dispatched to? And it may be somebody that was found not breathing. It could be a lot of different things, but it all goes into a system that we use to where I can look and we call it a blotter. So we can look at the blotter and see. I think you had a case yesterday, mm-hmm. and the blotter said that the gentleman hadn't been seen since the 5th. Well, we knew yesterday was the 12th, so for 6 days this person has been down. So you kind of prepare yourself of what's going on and what you're going to see.
Yeah, and I think something that we deal with a lot is that some people don't necessarily know they need to call 911. Some people might just call straight to our office and say that they found their father deceased, or they might even call the funeral home, and then we have to get that phone call as even more secondary information.
And that's happened several times. Yeah. It happens a lot of times that people they look up and find the coroner's office number and they'll call that number. The good thing is we do answer that phone 24/7. So even though we're out of the office after 4 o'clock each day, that phone is still rolled over and somebody will answer that.
Yeah.
When I was here doing the podcast the other day, after we got off the podcast, my phone rang, and it was a elderly lady that she just called to want to know if this was my number. I told her it was, and then she went on to say how that she was sick, and that she wanted to put up a sign that said who to call when she died because she lived by herself. And that's a big fear. People fear of dying by themselves in a
Not
house.
alone, yeah.
And in honesty, probably, especially since COVID, we have seen more and more of that, of where people do die alone a lot.
And that's kind of what we talked about the other day, where people don't check on their loved ones. That's when we get people in these houses that have been there for weeks at a time just because people won't make that phone call. And then that's the same thing. Elderly aren't getting checked on every day. That's why they have that fear and they want to give you a heads up.
Well, and a lot of people's moved away from after they graduate high school and everything. They don't come back a lot of times to their hometowns to live just because of job shortages. And so, like this lady the other day, her closest relative was a daughter, and she lived in Cincinnati. So I told the lady, I said, and she told me what funeral home she wanted. She had it all picked out, and I was like, that's fine, but make sure you put that I need to contact your daughter, so I'm not looking for that next of kin.
Yeah. So back to with 911, do you use the radio as well, like med units do and things like that? You're marking yourself on scene, all that stuff.
Yeah, and our times become very important because we do not declare death. The actual official, quote, declared death time is when we arrive on the scene and we declare it. So somebody may not have been seen for 5 or 6 days, but in our office, the standard procedure is their date and time of death is when we arrive on the scene and we declare that, because it is hard to kind of determine when somebody actually died unless we have video or we have something like that that can show us that.
Yeah. And that's like another thing that TV shows kind of depict completely different than what's in real life. The liver thermometers and things like that. You can use that, but it's still just an estimate because it takes so many other factors that are still making that body decompose or go into different things.
And that's exactly right. I mean, a body will cool on average about a degree to half a degree to a degree an hour. And when that happens, it goes to a certain temperature, and then it stops there as far as that goes. But what has to be taken into consideration is what they were wearing, how hot or cold the house is, all those factors, environmental factors, if they're laying on a floor, a concrete floor compared to a carpet, things like that. So when you look at that, that's all an estimate. We go by more of, are they stiff, which stiff means they have rigor mortis. Rigor mortis starts setting in about 30 minutes after somebody dies, depending on, again, environmental conditions. And it sets into joints first. It'll set into the jaw. It'll set into the, a lot of times the arms and the elbows, things like that is where it goes first. And then it works itself through the body. And when that happens, that's going to work all the way through. And it could take anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, depending on what the environmental conditions are, what they're wearing, different things like that, of that stiffness. We also look at lividity. Lividity is where the blood settles. The blood is going to settle to the lowest portion of the body. And if it is somebody's been there longer than 6 hours, a lot of times if you press on that, you'll see all the blood, and you press on it, and usually longer than 6 hours, that'll stay blotched. So we know that'll tell us a little bit. But we run so many calls, and you know this as well as I do, that when you're running that call and you get there, a lot of times it's, well, I didn't know they were deceased. I thought they were just sleeping. And people a lot of times sleep in a house all day long, or walking around doing their thing in a house or at a scene, and nobody's calling 911 saying that that person is deceased. And then when we get there and start interviewing, that's where that kind of goes to.
Yeah. And I think we'll get into more like the lividity and stuff and rigor mortis in this next question, because now you're actually on scene. So walk us through the process. Once you get on scene, who you go to first? Do you dissect the scene first?
The first person that we go to is whoever is in charge of that scene. So we're coming up. Usually the good thing is I'll leave the house or the office or wherever I'm at, and I will mark up on the radio. You talked about the radio earlier. We always mark up on the radio, and they keep our times because time becomes very important. When we arrive on the scene, usually the paramedics or the police will come up to where we're at instead of and talking to us in front of the family. They'll come to where we're at when we arrive, and they'll tell us what's going on. Hey, the person's in a back bedroom. There's 5 family members there, or there's no family and a friend is who found them. So we want to know all that information. Is there any blood? Is there anything that looks like foul play? And their answer may be no at the time, but when we get in there and actually look at the scene. So after I speak with the paramedics and I speak with the police, usually myself and the paramedics or police or whoever's on the scene will walk in the house together. And I'll introduce myself of who I am, and I'll talk to whoever found them. Get a little bit, maybe a 5-minute conversation, and then I want to see the body. So we'll go in, and the thing is, the body is never moved until we move it or say that it's good to move. And the reason we want that is we take all the pictures that we can take. When I first started doing this, pictures were 35 millimeter. We had to kind of limit those a lot of times, and then they had to go get developed at Walmart, or they had to get developed
Before my time, by the way.
Yeah, it was way before your time. And so then when digital came along and you could use an SD card, one of the first things I learned, and I learned this from a KSP detective, was you can never take too many pictures. You can always take too little, but you can never take too many. So we make sure that we're shooting pictures from outside in. So when we get out, one of the first pictures we shoot may be the front of the house or the front of the residence. And then from there, it is the mailbox, so we can have an address. And then we work our way inside the house until we get into where the room is. And so from there, pictures are shot before we touch anything in that room, because we want to be able to say, okay, this is exactly how things are.
And I think with pictures too, we'll probably talk about this with like reports and stuff later, but you want your pictures to tell a story just as much as your report does. So every step you're taking, you're snapping pictures, so it's almost like a video.
Exactly. You want to bring that scene back to life.
Yeah.
So you take as many pictures as you can, and if a picture is bad, we don't delete it. It stays in the pictures. That way we have that, and nobody can say that we altered that picture or anything like that. It goes right along with the scene. So all the pictures are taken. If nothing looks suspicious and we move the body around and we think, okay, everything's good, then we will go ahead and move the body a lot of times. And usually transporters, paramedics, or fire department, or all will help move the body. And I, as an investigator, will go and sit down with the family or sit down with whoever found that body. And I have a ton of questions I need to ask them. So we start, a lot of times I want to know what has happened in the last 72 hours. What can you tell me in the last 72 to 48 hours of what that person has been doing? Did they go anywhere? Were they feeling bad? Did they not feel good when they went to bed? All that stuff comes into play. What kind of medical history they have? What kind of medications they're on? If we know all that, then we try to get the best picture of that life of that person. And when you do that, then we can take that investigation further.
So what are some of the first things that you notice on scene? Like the how the house is kept, how it looks like they lived, if it looks like they are using a walker, if they're ambulatory, different things like that, medications on the counter.
Any of those plays a big role, because the medications are really important. The scene in general, just like you just described, you know, we want to know if a rug is tripped over. We want to know if where the person's laying. If they're not in bed, are they laying beside the bed? Did it look like they were trying to get out of bed? Were they in the bathroom? Were they on the commode and they fell off the commode and now they're in the bathtub, or they're up against, wedged in between those two things? Because it changes a lot if that happens. People would be surprised if, you know, the way when you're investigating a scene, you get there and somebody is wedged in between the commode and the wall. And it's like, okay, the first thing I want to do is look at their neck. Could they have got wedged in there and then they couldn't breathe and they didn't have the strength to get themselves out? A lot of people don't realize that somebody can suffocate to death in a matter of seconds. And in turn, they go unconscious. And when they go unconscious from lack of oxygen, that in turn, they can't get out of there. And people will say, well, they should have been able to get out of there real easily. No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, yeah.
And what happens is people get their, we call it positional asphyxia. So they get a positional asphyxia with their neck, and then in the little bit of seconds it takes, if they're not breathing and they can't get air in, what happens? They get excited. So then they start fighting. Then the seconds keep on clicking, clicking until lo and behold they're dead, and that's where they're found. Probably 2 to 3 years ago, I got a call 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're like, paramedics are on the scene. They got called because somebody had a varicose vein bleeding, and you're thinking, okay, that couldn't be what killed them.
Varicose vein for
Varicose vein, a lot of people have those if they stand on their legs wrong, poor circulation, things like that, and they'll have veins in their legs that are bad, and they kind of stick up, but they're very brittle, and so one of those will bust, and when it busts, blood starts spurting out, and if you can't control that, you can easily bleed to death. A lot of those have to be cauterized, things like that. So I got to the house and I walked in, and it literally looked like a bloodbath in there with blood everywhere. And you could follow, the lady was elderly, and you could follow where she went. She woke up with this. It looked like she had hit it on the bed, and that cut it. So then she tried to get from the bed into the bathroom. And by the time she did that, she was trying to grab something to hold pressure on her leg, but she was bleeding so much because she was on blood thinners that she literally sat down on the commode and bled to death right there because of how the blood thinners kicked in. It was just the right storm. And people's like, wow, could you really die from that? Yeah, you can. And you could put that piece together by looking and following her. I always say, follow the evidence. Look at the evidence, follow the evidence, and it won't lead you wrong. If you have assumptions, then yes, it could lead you wrong real quick, and that's where we don't want to be. So we always work that scene the same way every single time.
And that's where it becomes so important getting that information from family, and then even us looking at medications and stuff that she's on, figuring out her medical history and different things like that to put those puzzle pieces together to really kind of justify what you're thinking in your head.
Exactly, because people don't think, okay, that can happen, but it happens every day. And when we look at that, all those go together. It's your medical history, it's the medications, it's how the scene looks. Just like you said, is the walker turned over? Are they laying half on the bed and half off with a nebulizer for asthma or COPD in their hand to where they're trying to get to that because they can't breathe? Well, maybe they died from the respiratory failure because they couldn't get a breath. They were trying to get to their inhaler, or they're trying to get to their breathing treatment and just couldn't make it, and they fell straight back onto the bed. So you got to kind of start piecing those together.
So in the last episode, we also kind of talked about the interagency collaboration that plays in all of these scenes. So and you kind of touched on this earlier too, but how do police help on these scenes versus EMS? And I feel like EMS is, even again with your background, like EMS helps you just in that way because of all the medical knowledge. They could be on there and confirm, that vein definitely could have caused this to happen.
And what EMS does for us, it gives us another way of declaring, yes, that person is deceased. So we make sure when EMS gets there, they in turn hook a heart monitor onto people, and they run a 3 or 4 lead EKG that'll show that the person is in straight line. And it's called a systole, but a systole is somebody that's flatline on a monitor. So they will declare that in 2 to 3 leads. And leads are different views of the heart. So they will look at different views of the heart to make sure that's there. Then after everything's said and done, that's when they call on the radio and say, Med 1 to dispatch, we have a code 200. Code 200 means somebody's deceased. We need 1079. Then pretty much they will start gathering information for us. The name, the age, the date of birth, their social. Anything they can get for us like that, that helps us because when we get on the scene, they're like, here. Police, they're standing by to make sure they're like, well, nothing really looks unusual. But then we go in and look at it and we're like, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. The person's been moved, or this happened or that happened. And then if that's the case and we truly think that it is suspicious in any way, then we back everybody out of the house. And everybody backs out of the house. We pick up the phone and we're calling, we're trying to get a detective, whether that be from Kentucky State Police or whether that be from Ashland Police Department here. And we just wait. And we won't move the body. We won't touch the body. We won't or disturb anything because we want that detective to see it just like we did. Mm-hmm. Now, there's been cases and it's just been circumstances that we say, okay, I believe this is what happened, but I want to make sure.
Mm-hmm. You want that second opinion.
And we'll go ahead and call somebody and get them out there. And they know when we call, it's important.
Yeah.
And so they always make sure that they are there on time. Everything happens. They get there in a timely manner, and then we work it together. Now, if it's a natural death, they want the information, and a field officer, we usually do that. They'll take the information, and they'll still file a report. But it'll be a very short and sweet report that they responded to an unattended death, and that'll be it. Compared to, we got a suspicious death here, and now we're going to walk through all the steps. This person's going to go for autopsy. They will show up at autopsy a lot of times. If we think it's important enough to do that, they show up and they collect evidence at autopsy that they will take to the crime lab. All we're really concerned about at autopsy is maybe recovering a projectile or making sure that we can document the wounds well, things like that. Anything that we believe that's going to go to court, we will autopsy. Classic example. I'm getting ready to put a press release out sometime this evening on a auto accident that actually happened in Ohio. But the patient was worked into King's Daughters, UK King's Daughters in the ER, and we got the call this morning. It come in at 9 something, and the deputy's still working that call, getting all the paperwork and everything ready.
Currently,
because
it's almost 5 o'clock. So.
Yeah, you're looking at it's 10 till 5 right now. He's worked that case since 9:30 this morning, and in turn, he'll have everything ready for a transporter to take that down to Frankfurt in the morning for autopsy. And the reason we're autopsying it is it was a head-on collision. They could be litigation later on, and we want to document all the injuries and making sure all the injuries are there and what injury, because there's a multitude. So what injury actually caused that person's death?
And I think back to like KSP, which is Kentucky State Police, they have some of the specialists that we were talking about on the last episode where we're death investigation specialists. They actually have like arson specialists and car wreck specialists, things like that we'll call out no matter what, just because it's that specific type of death.
And that's correct. I mean, when you have an accident reconstructionist and we have a death from an automobile in our jurisdiction, the first call we make is to KSP Post, and they in turn send their accident reconstructionist out because he's the one that's going to tell me exactly what happened, where the cars were, why they ended up the way they ended up, the forces behind that, all that stuff. And that's going to help with our investigation to show, okay, that driver did not have a seatbelt on. The driver did have a seatbelt on. The driver may have just had a lap belt on. We're going to give him all of our stuff. He's going to give us all of his. His is going to take months and months. Ours may take 45 days. But that helps him piece everything together for his investigation, such as toxicology. We'll give him toxicology. And a classic example of that would be if the cars are both in the middle of the road. So you got a line, one's coming this way, one's going this way, and the line's in the middle. Somebody crosses over, but at the last minute they pull back, and this car crosses back over trying to get away from them. They may hit dead center of the road. Mm-hmm. Okay, who was truly at fault? Who was where? That's up for them, and that's why they have the specialists that can do that.
Yeah.
Same thing with an arson case. And the deal is, and what everybody needs to remember is, we don't move that body. So if it's a case like that, the body may lay in that position for a couple of hours until everybody has pictures. We use 3D lasers now. We use drones. There's all kinds of different things out there that we can use to document that scene, to where then they can take every bit of that and put it in a 3D layer and lay it back.
And okay, now I want to go back to the EMS side of it, because I think one thing that gets kind of overlooked is, say the scene we're at, there's no family there, but EMS may have transported this person 3 days prior and could say, this is actually what they were complaining of, this is what we treated them for, and that really helps the case a lot.
And especially with technology, computers now, everything's online, so they're able to pull up and they may say, hey, we transported that person 2 days ago and they were having chest pains. And our EKG was clear then, but we in turn took them to the ER. Okay, did they have any family? Yeah, there was a daughter here and this is the name. And so stuff like that really helps us, because we spend a big part of our investigation just trying to track people down. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah, that whole next to kin conversation we had on the last one.
Exactly, yeah. When you go back, you know how long it takes to try to find somebody sometimes. Other cases, you may find somebody before you get back to the morgue, because somebody has told somebody, which in turn knew somebody and got a hold of family. So that happens a lot.
Okay, so now once you like understand the scene and everything, you kind of start talking to family a little bit and you start documenting the scene. How does that documentation process start at the scene specifically?
Pictures play a big role in it. We also document and make notes of anything that's disturbed. It could be the fact that how the person lays. Do they lay supine, which is on their back? Or do they lay prone, which is face down? Are they on their side? How are they laying? That's a big thing. What are they laying on? What's disturbed in the house? And what people don't realize a lot of times is, in that room, anything on the body or around the body is ours as evidence. So we want to look. We take a good, quick look. And then when we move the body, we also take another look to make sure we didn't miss anything, that something could have been there and we just didn't see it until we moved them. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. A classic example would be a suicide that we had. The guy was laid back on the bed, and he was halfway on the bed, halfway off the bed, and there was a knife in the floor. There was a box cutter laying there, and there was a gun that was laying just out of his reach in a corner. We look at the gun. Gun looks good, no questions. We look at the knife, and he had cut his wrist real high up. And so that didn't do what he wanted to succeed in doing with a self-harm. So then he used a box cutter to cut his throat. So we're sitting there going, oh, okay, we do everything. Nobody hurt anything. We load this guy up and we get him to the morgue, and he had a beard. So we clean off the blood and we start really looking, and he's got a gunshot under his chin. And we're like, wait a minute. So everybody stops, and we're calling detectives again, because I called detectives the first time. And we're like, we got to go back to the house. This is the problem. We had to get a search warrant to go back to the house and to get inside that house. And all we wanted was the gun. We wanted to see what it was. Well, when we looked at the gun was actually a small caliber shotgun that he was able to put a .223 shell in, which is a rifle shell. Shouldn't even fired.
Yeah.
But it did. And we didn't think it fired, because we really didn't think that's what was going on until we got all the wounds cleaned up and stuff. And in turn, the problem was with the .223 shell, it didn't have enough velocity. It had enough to clear the gun, and when it went up through the chin, it hit the hard palate and then just lodged over. So when we were able to piece everything together, this person shot himself first, and it went through the chin up and just laid in the hard palate. And so that wouldn't have killed him.
Yeah.
We knew this. And so then we saw where he'd taken the knife and tried to cut his wrist, but he cut it too high. The third time was the actual throat, which he hit everything he needed to hit to cause his death. But we had to put that back together and actually piece every little piece to show that truly happened. He did not, nobody come in and did this to him. Nothing else happened to him. So something like that takes a long time to put together to make sure that we're doing and giving the right answers to the family so they have closure.
And that's a whole separate like section of documentation, because once you get there, you're, you know, measuring where he's at, the wounds, everything, and then you go back to the gun. You have to make sure that the gun, he was able to pull the trigger, nobody else had pulled the trigger, different things like that, all the measurements that come into play.
That comes in a lot of times. I mean, we're all the time, like if it's a weapon, we will bag hands so nothing gets disturbed as far as evidence goes and we don't lose that. If somebody, a lot of times before we move them, we will lay down a sheet and we'll make that lets us collect evidence. So we want to do all the measurements and everything to where that body could go right back in. We may sketch the scene. We may do a rough sketch, and I can tell you I can't draw worth anything, but you know I can understand my drawings, and then I'll take it back and I'll put it on like a Word. A lot of times Microsoft Word, or there's Scene PD, 3D stuff. You can do a lot of different things to make sure that that's all documented. It's you take an auto accident. One of the measurements we take right off the bat is we find something that we know is going to be there 50 years from now. It may be a tree, it may be whatever, and we measure all the measurements from that standpoint. So it's a standalone thing that we know if 5 years from now somebody comes out and they want to remeasure that, they can do that because they have the measurements of where we started and where we ended. All that makes sense that a lot of people don't even realize.
And so we talked about photographing a bunch, but you also want to go back and photograph after the body's moved. You want to do everything like from the empty spot that they were laying and still make sure that everything is connecting the way it's supposed to. Nothing looks suspicious outside of the room, anything like that.
That's exactly. You want to make sure that you have before and after pictures. And it's like when we get that body out of the house and we take it to the morgue. Once we get it there and we put it on a table, the first thing we're doing is cutting all clothing off. We want everything that we can to see that body. If we can't see it, we can't document it. The other thing that goes with that is before we remove anything like cutting all the clothing, we cut pockets first. Because we have found stuff in pockets, whether it be drugs. Me and you worked a case not long ago, and the person was naked except for socks.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, you know, we're pretty good with this. We just got to figure out why this person died. Well, when we got to the morgue and we went to cut the socks, drugs were in the socks. And boom,
It's crazy.
You know, then we waited for toxicology to come back and we pieced it together
Yep.
and it was an overdose. So all that stuff plays a major role. So all pockets are cut, all clothing is cut off. And then all that, if we do not collect any of the evidence, anything's to collect, we remove, if somebody has jewelry, anything like that, one of the biggest things we do before we do anything is we shoot pictures of jewelry. We shoot pictures of necks, we shoot pictures of hands. Anywhere there's jewelry, we document that. And then, of course, we take it and we collect that. It goes in our personal property lockers to where it can be given back to the next of kin. And so all that has to be documented and taken care of.
And I think an important note with that, what I've found is like the best practice is if you take a picture of one hand, you take a picture of the other to make sure that it matches. If there's one ring on another, there's not one on this hand or there's none at all. Same thing with ears. You take a picture of one ear, you take a picture of the other, just to make sure that you're getting everything possible.
And that happens all the time. I mean, families, they may not have seen their loved one forever and they're like, oh, they wear rings on every finger. And it's like, I go back and look at the pictures and I'm like, no, there's only one ring on there, or there's no rings, but we have a watch.
Yeah.
And then when I revisit that with the family, they're like, oh, yeah, she left them at home. It was early that morning. She wasn't wearing them. Well, now we know where the rings, you know, so we always make sure that we document anything like that.
And part of the documentation is your final case report, in which we kind of talked about the prosecution aspect of it and how important that report is and how it's like gold in the courtroom. So how thorough do you have to actually be, and what all do you include in that report?
When I do a report, it tells a story. And I want that story to be to where when somebody grabs a hold of it, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it tells them exactly who was called out, what address they went to, what the circumstances were, what we had when we got there, how the body was, what we found on examination, and we walk that through to that the person is put in our cooler until arrangements can be made with the funeral home. So that documentation can be a half a page, it could be 3 pages. It depends on exactly what the case is and how thorough we have to be to make sure we cover everything.
And I want to go to what we do at the morgue now, like how important our morgue comes into play in these deaths, because we get to, you can see on scene and, you know, take what you can from there, but a full post-mortem examination comes at our morgue when we get to cut the clothes off. You examine every inch of the body. You can measure scars, tattoos, different things like that. And even you can even see where, like what we were talking about earlier with lividity in the body, where it sets, how it's set, and different things like that. And you can determine if the body's been moved from the position that we saw them in, specifically on the scene, different things like that.
That all comes to play, and it all has to be documented. One of the things we do if it's a accident to where we have a lot of injuries, we have a male and a female documentation paper that we use of the body. And so we'll go in there and we'll start drawing on that for scars, or for, it may be a laceration, which is a cut. It may be an abrasion, which looks more like you've skinned your knee or something like that. But our abrasions may be the whole leg or something from road rash. It may be the simple fact that we want to document from a gunshot where an entrance wound is and where an exit wound is. So that way we can look at trajectory of the bullet and how it went. We have a lot better light in the morning, and honestly, we can take our time. That's a big thing on the scene. If it's not an absolute case of leaving that body exactly where it's at, then we're going to move that body as quickly as we can too. Yeah. So in turn, at the morgue, we don't have to do that. We can sit there and go through every single step that we need to do to document everything. Then we can go, okay, now we'll do our toxicology and we'll put them in the cooler. So all that becomes a big part of what we do.
And what's really important with that too is like how you were talking, people are found on their front or their back. So when we get to the morgue, we can roll them to whatever side and make sure that we have a full view of every single aspect of this case.
Yeah, and even if there's a lot of times that we'll get somebody deceased and we will take them to the hospital. And we use, in the emergency room, a lot of times they will shoot x-rays for us so we can document even better. We know that their leg is broke, but how bad is that leg broke? So we get an x-ray of that. We may know that we have an entrance wound from a gunshot, but we want to know if there's an exit. And we can't find the exit because there's so much blood or something, then we can go in there and shoot a picture of that, and it's like, oh, it didn't exit, it's right here. So all those stuff becomes very important to us when we're trying to determine how that person died. Somebody's leg may be mangled, but that's not pretty much what killed them.
It's not a fatal.
No, it's not a fatal. It looks bad, and it looks gory, and it looks all this stuff that people's like, it's great for shock factor.
Yeah.
But that truly didn't kill that person. Now let's x-ray a head, let's x-ray a neck, let's x-ray the chest. I try to x-ray everything from usually the pelvis up, and because that's your major thing that's going to kill somebody. So we'll be, oh, he's got major chest trauma. There's 10 out of 12 ribs broke. And then we start looking at that stuff and breaking that down.
Which all isn't stuff that you can see from the outside. Like, if we had x-ray glasses, that would be awesome.
It'd be great.
It'd help us a whole lot. And that's just like little details like that. How important are the little details to help you find the big picture?
And one of the big things is if we send somebody to autopsy, the ME's offices are so high-tech now that they have Lotus systems in them. And it's like a huge CT scanner, and you can run that whole body through there, and it will tell you every injury. And that's really, it's a lot better than an x-ray machine because it gives you more detail. So you can see exactly where that is and what's going on with it.
And this is one question, like, how TV depicts it as something that happens so fast and immediate. You take them, you do all of your exams right there, and it's like, okay, cause of death is this. And, I mean, myth or reality, we've just sat here and in this short little segment we've said that's totally a myth, because prime example today, he's still on a case 510 from 9 o'clock this morning. So it's not an instantaneous thing.
No, not at all. And I call that the 30-minute or 60-minute TV effect.
Yeah.
Because that's what everybody's used to. They're used to watching CSI back when CSI was big on TV. And in 60 minutes, they've got back DNA. They've got back the toxicology. They've worked the whole case and probably prosecuted somebody by now, to where we're sitting there 3 hours into a case and you're going, and we still got a lot of times to go.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times that we're out all night working that case, depending on what it is.
So now about next steps. Like, everything's documented. You found family, say, and everything. How do you determine what's next? Once you're back at the morgue, you're trying to finish everything up.
The neat thing is, like with our place, we have a office communication sheet. So I know that I can determine cause of death, and I need medical records, I need toxicology, and I need to be able to write my report, and I get all that done. So what we do, we check on the form that it's not going for autopsy or that it is. Then we check a box to make sure that if there's blood to go out, it goes out for toxicology. And then we just also check a box for a Casper report that has to be done. We talked about that last episode, but a Casper report is basically something that lets me run a fact-finding thing to check and see what narcotics somebody has been prescribed and has been filled. So that gives us a little bit more about the investigation.
And that's only in Kentucky, so it helps a lot, but it also might kind of drew back some things.
Yeah, every state has it, or some form of it now.
Yeah.
Back in the pill mill days, back in like 2010, 2011, all that, a lot of people from here went to Florida to get their medications and at the pill mills and stuff. And lo and behold, we can't run anything from that. And at that time, Florida didn't have a Casper system. We pushed from here in Kentucky to make Florida, well, I won't say make them, but we pushed hard to work with Florida to get a Casper system so they could be running that stuff, so these pill mills could be shut down and things like that. People wasn't being able just to walk through the door and get something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we know next of kin has to decide a funeral home and everything like that if the decedent hasn't already picked it out, which it still has to be authorized by next of kin. So how do you know when a body can be released to a funeral home?
The next of kin, basically what we tell everybody is contact the funeral home. Once the funeral home knows that the body's there and that it can be, that they want them to pick it up, also contact the deputy or contact our office. So they'll call and they'll say, hey, we've talked to XYZ funeral home, and they know that we want them to handle all of our loved ones. So from there, what happens is I contact the funeral home and I'll be like, hey, they're ready to be released? You can get them, or hey, they're going for an autopsy. So the funeral home needs to know what's going on. So we let them know that they can pick that body up in a timely manner, or that it may be the next day because of autopsy. And then from there, we work with the funeral home to get that body released and to their services to where they can do their magic on the decedent.
Okay, so another thing that plays in with us, and I don't know how much this affects other people, is the whole organ donation thing. Sometimes they have to be released from organ donation to be able to go to the funeral home.
And you're exactly right. By law in the state of Kentucky, anybody that dies, we have to call. Now it's Network for Hope. It used to be CODA, but we have to call them. And they have a registry, and if you've registered when you got your driver's license and said you want to be an organ donor, they know about it.
Yeah.
So we give them the name, we give them all the circumstances, and we give them what happened. They will decide whether they're going to follow or not. If they want to follow, then what happens is we give them the next of kin's name and number. They will call them, and then they will work out if the family wishes to have anything donated. If they do not, then the body can be released. If they do, it all depends, because what ends up happening is if they're following, they will come and pick that body up and say the family agrees to donation. Then they will take that usually to Louisville, and at Louisville they have a suite down there that they harvest anything that they can, and then they will release the body to the funeral home. And it's a pretty neat thing. I mean, organ donation is very much a huge success stories in a lot of people
Yeah,
that we know.
life-changing.
Whether it be they need a heart, they need skin for burns, it could be eyes for corneas. That plays a major role.
Yeah.
All that stuff plays into roles, and the problem is only certain things can be used depending on how long the body has been deceased. Eyes are a big thing. The corneas are huge. That even though they've been deceased for maybe several hours, they can still use those for somebody. So all that becomes a big play, and we cannot release that body until Network for Hope tells us, okay, it's all right, we're not following anymore, or they will send somebody up to pick the body up to take care of what they need to take care of.
So we also touched on this a little bit in the last episode, but after they're released to the funeral home, everything is done there. There's still a death certificate that has to be signed with the cause and manner of death. But we're also doing toxicology testing and possibly send them to an autopsy. So how does that affect the length of time that death certificate can be signed out on?
I always tell all family that a death certificate will not be available for at least 2 to 3 weeks. It takes us that long to get toxicology in. When I first started this, toxicology was anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months. And we switched to a contracted service that handles that now, and they do a great job. They're phenomenal.
Yeah.
If we have questions on toxicology, we can actually call that number. We've got a number to call, 800 number for that company that has toxicologists on staff that will talk to us, and they want to know, just because somebody's levels are high doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
They want to know the story. They want to know what's behind that story, and then we'll make that determination that yes, this is an overdose, or that medicine contributed to their death. A lot of people that have kidney failure and things like that, medicines do not excrete out of the body like they should a lot of times, and people don't have those levels taken and they get high, and we see those in toxicology. Then we start looking back, okay, this person had a heart attack. Well, guess what? That medication is at a high enough level that it can cause problems with arrhythmias and things like that that could in turn affect how that person died. So we look at that whole picture. Everything's a picture. It's not one size fits all. We have to determine all that, and we figure that out from there.
And I think the same way that the toxicologists are doing now, where they want that whole picture, is kind of the same way the medical examiner's office operates. When they want us to we have that authorization form where we depict as much as we can at the scene that we know, medical history and things like that, so that when because they weren't on the scene with us, so they're sitting there and they're running that picture through their head. They're looking at our photographs, which is why that's also important to make a full picture. So they operate kind of the same way.
And you're exactly right. And we have a great advantage because we do have a morgue and we have a cooler and we have all this stuff that we need to operate on efficiently. So just like today, we retrieved that body today. We got the body today from the hospital. That body will leave out at 5 a.m. It will go to Frankfurt. It'll be there by 7:30. And the person that takes that down is the same person that helped work that case as a transporter today. So in turn, he'll be able to tell the person doing the autopsy, this is what was on the scene. This is what the police said. The cars looked like this. All those become a huge part of the investigation for them to give us an educated answer of why that person died.
Which these are all kind of things of why it's so important not to rush the cause of death, because you want, like we said, all of the evidence to lead to the exact place that you're going to put on that death certificate.
Exactly. You got to be able to prove why you wrote it the way you wrote it.
Yeah.
And if you can't prove that, then don't put it on there. And we don't do a pending death certificate. A pending death certificate, and people get really aggravated a lot of times. I need that death certificate. I need it, and that's fine. You do, but you want the true answer and not something that just says pending on it. So we make sure that we have true answers before we actually send that off.
Okay, so what is something about death investigations that most people probably don't realize happen?
Probably the simple fact of everybody gets toxicology, and it's not solved in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Those are the big things. That's the miss, and we solve those and take care of that.
Okay, so we did have our first few questions submitted. I'm going to pull those up right now that are going to kind of close us out on this podcast. The first question is Greg from Louisa, Kentucky, and he asked, what percentage of death investigations are overdoses, natural, and accidental? And have you seen an increase or decrease in these deaths in the last 10 years?
I've seen, probably we'll start off with how many are actually overdoses. And a lot of times overdoses are classified as accidental deaths because they may be an addict, but they didn't mean to kill themselves. They were out for their next high. So we classify a lot of our deaths as accidental that are overdoses. So it kind of serves 2 points.
Yeah.
But overdoses affect about 23 to 25% of our caseload. Yeah, so about a third, you might as well say, a third to a fourth of our caseload is overdoses. When you look at natural deaths, that takes care of probably 60% of our deaths.
Definitely majority.
Yeah, it's the majority of somebody, it's a sudden death, and now we have to determine, was it a heart attack? Was it heart disease? Was it a combination of several different things of their medical history that kind of contributed all to it? We look at suicides. Suicides play about maybe a 5% in our investigations. We probably average about 12 suicide deaths a year. Now go back into December and we had 3 in 1 month.
Yeah.
So it just depends on exactly what we're investigating. But those are the numbers. And when you look at this, I got into it in 2007. We had huge numbers in overdoses, and Boyd County will hit usually in the top 5 every year for overdose deaths in Kentucky. That number has drastically went down. Our average year is 35 to 45. That's our average year of how many deaths we work. When it looks to, if you to go back to 2021, when COVID hit, we had 70 overdose deaths that year. And then the next year we dropped it down to like 67. Next year we went down into the 50s. Last year in 2025, we finally got that number down to where it's back down to where it was average again.
Yeah.
So we've worked hard to do that. I think Narcan plays a role in that. And Narcan, a lot of people have their own views on Narcan. My view on Narcan is if it was your loved one, if it was your daughter, your son, one of your loved ones that was doing that, and Narcan could save them, you would want them to have Narcan.
Want it, yeah.
And if Narcan wasn't used in this county, we would have an astronomical number of deaths. Also, people went from doing pills to doing heroin in this county. And then from heroin, we saw the fentanyls. And then in like 17 and 18, we saw methamphetamine come into town. And when meth comes to town, violence comes to town.
Yeah.
And we saw a huge amount of violence. We had probably our record number of homicides and things like that this year. So all that played a role. And then the overdoses kicked back in because of all the fentanyl spinoffs. And now we're finally back down to 40, and everybody's like, that's a lot. Yeah. Well, it is a lot, but it's better than 70.
Yeah,
and absolutely. We're making progress every single year. A lot of the dealers are being prosecuted now. If we use a phone and we find evidence that somebody had sold that to them, we have got convictions for manslaughter charges.
That's where technology, the advancements has helped us so much.
Oh, yeah, by any means, because if we can get into that stuff, then we're golden, and we look at that a lot.
And I want to go back to the number of naturals, because I think so many people, like when coroners come out, death investigators, whatever, they think that it's something big, like a fire, a murder, a suicide, something like that. But they look over the whole naturals that we still have to work.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of people, it's like, well, somebody was just found deceased in the house. Well, why couldn't the doctor sign that out? Because most doctors won't sign a death certificate if they are not actively caring for that patient. And when I say actively caring, I'm talking about they haven't seen that patient in the last probably 24 hours. Yeah. You're not going to find a doctor that wants to sign a death certificate. Yeah. So in turn, it's easier for us to work the case, sign it, and take care of everything instead of working it backwards after the doctor refuses.
Yep. Okay, our next question is Jana from Columbus, and she asks, if a person purchased their own casket from someplace other than a funeral home, like Walmart or Costco, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Yes.
Does the funeral home store it for them, or does it get stored at the person's home?
It's stored at the person's home. That happened not but about a year ago. A person died, and the wife was like, he's got his casket in the garage. And it was like, well, you got to work with a funeral home to make sure all that happens and everything. But that casket was used. So there's no law that says that they can't buy their own casket.
That's very interesting. Okay, and then our third and final question for this episode is from our questions on TikTok, and it's from, which I don't have a full name, I have a username, but it's LLOxney8, I think. And he asked about a case from 2020 in February in a different county, but says about 8 months later, a report came out saying that the DNA testing revealed that it was a pack of wild dogs. And he asked, does it usually take that long to get DNA tests from animal bites, especially when it's a killer animal?
It takes that long to get DNA anytime.
Yeah.
People are amazed because, again, with TV, DNA's done right then.
Yeah.
It's like, boom, it hits. Well, normal DNA, you're talking months before we get anything back at all. And the thing about DNA is if somebody hasn't been in the system, if they haven't been in the military, if they haven't been in prison, if they haven't registered their DNA in some way, then in turn, it comes back negative anyways. So DNA does play a role, but the good thing is it takes a long time to get the DNA.
Yeah.
So you have to sit there and wait. And it's a waiting game. They do have rapid DNA testing now in Kentucky, which is pretty neat, but it's not going to give you everything that the long DNA tests take. And so when they say 8 months to me is not a long time.
Yeah.
To a family member, yeah, it
Yeah,
is. But it goes back to making sure that things are done right. And a lot of times we just don't say anything at all. We wait for that DNA to come back.
Yeah. Okay. So there are our 3 questions from the public today. Make sure to submit your questions in the comments. You can email us at askacorner900@gmail.com with questions. You can message us on Facebook. Anything to get your questions answered, we will try to do, and you'll be included in the podcast, hopefully. As you can learn from this episode, corner work is a lot more than people think it is. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot that people really don't realize. And I think our next episode is going to be on autopsies.
Yeah, the next episode we're going to do is going to be the difference between what actually happens in a autopsy. What goes on in that? The steps that goes on. How do we prepare for that? And actually the findings. So those always become very interesting, and that's a question that people wanted to know that we've had 1,000 times. So we're going to answer that on the next podcast.
Yeah, and what different cases go to autopsies, how you decide to go. So all these things are going to be answered. So again, make sure you're following us on all of our social medias, on TikTok and Facebook, which we are really booming on right now.
Very happy with the numbers.
Very, very happy. We have almost 1,200 followers on TikTok already, almost 600 on Facebook, I think, and our views are going up, so make sure you do that. Our podcasts are now streaming on Spotify also, as well as YouTube, so make sure you're checking it out on all platforms, spreading the word out a bunch, and send in your questions.
And if anybody wants to sponsor us, we do have one sponsor, which is
SCU Scene Cleanup Services.
And we're working on trying to get more sponsors. Sponsors is what's going to keep us rolling. Sponsors are going to keep us being able to do what we do here and get the word out of what a coroner actually does. We also want to thank Tri-State Media Services. They have been a huge player into this. They work very hard at what they do. If anybody's looking to get into this or they need photography, videography, and podcasting, please get a hold of them because they do great work and they're out here helping the public every day.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode.
Thank you.